My mom threw my clothes on the lawn and shouted, "You're a pathetic leech. Don't ever think of coming back." I packed my car in silence and drove away. 2 months later, she sent over 35 messages begging me to come back. I, 22M, was kicked out by my own mother. 2 months later, she won't stop begging me to return. I came home from my shift at the warehouse to find my life scattered across the front lawn. Shirts tangled in the hedges. Jeans trampled into the wet grass. My books, my laptop, everything I owned thrown out like garbage. My mother stood on the porch with her arms crossed, her face twisted into something I'd never seen before. Pure contempt. She told me I was a pathetic leech. She said I'd been bleeding her dry for years, and she was done. She told me not to think about coming back, ever. Her voice carried down the street, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Mrs. Patterson from next door pretended to check her mailbox while obviously watching the whole scene. I didn't argue, didn't beg. I just started picking up my things in silence, methodically folding what I could salvage and loading everything into my beat-up Honda. My hands shook, but I kept my face blank. She wanted a reaction, and I refused to give her one. The whole time she stood there watching, waiting for me to break down or fight back. I gave her nothing. 20 minutes later, I drove away with everything I owned stuffed into my car. I didn't look back at the house where I'd grown up. I had $300 in my checking account and half a tank of gas. No plan, no backup, nothing. The thing is, I'd been supporting myself since I was 16. Yeah, I lived at home, but I paid rent. $400 a month, which was half my paycheck from the warehouse. I bought my own food, paid for my own phone, my own car insurance. The only thing I didn't pay for was utilities, and even then I'd offered multiple times. She always refused and said the rent covered it. I'd been saving to move out anyway. Had almost $2,000 stashed away for a deposit on an apartment. But that money had vanished from my room 3 weeks ago. I'd mentioned it to her once, asked if she'd seen it. She'd gotten defensive, said I was accusing her of theft, turned the whole thing around on me. I dropped it because fighting with her never went anywhere good. Now I understood why she'd kicked me out so suddenly. She needed me gone before I could ask about the money again. I drove to a motel on the edge of town. $45 a night. I could afford 3 nights, maybe 4 if I didn't eat much. I sat on the stained bedspread in that cramped room and tried to figure out what to do next. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my older sister asking what happened, but I didn't have the energy to explain. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had changed. My supervisor noticed something was off and pulled me aside during break. I told him I needed to pick up extra shifts if possible, that I was in a tight spot. He didn't ask questions, just said he'd see what he could do. By the end of that first week, I'd moved from the motel to my car. I parked behind a 24-hour gym, paid for a membership so I could shower and look presentable for work. I kept my clothes in the trunk, organized in plastic bins. I learned which fast food places had the cheapest meals and which gas stations didn't care if you used their bathroom to brush your teeth at night. It wasn't comfortable, but it was manageable. More than that, it was mine. Nobody could take it away or hold it over my head. My sister kept calling. Finally, I answered. She asked why I'd just left like that, why I hadn't come to her for help. I explained what happened, about the clothes on the lawn, about Mom screaming. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she told me Mom had been telling everyone I'd stormed out after a fight, that I'd called her terrible names and destroyed some of her things before leaving, that I'd stolen money from her. The audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. She'd not only taken my savings, but was now telling people I'd stolen from her, painting herself as the victim to anyone who would listen. I asked my sister if she believed Mom's version. Another pause. She said she didn't know what to believe, but that Mom seemed genuinely upset. I laughed then, bitter and sharp. I told her she could believe whatever she wanted, that I was done trying to defend myself to people who'd already made up their minds. She said I was being unfair. I hung up. 2 weeks in, I'd picked up enough extra shifts that I could afford a room in a house with 3 other guys. It wasn't much, just a bedroom barely big enough for a mattress and a dresser, but it had a door that locked and nobody there cared about my business. The other guys worked odd hours too. We were like ghosts passing in the halls. I started sleeping better, started eating regularly again. The warehouse offered me a promotion to lead hand, a small bump in pay, but enough to matter. I took a second job on weekends doing landscaping work. I was exhausted all the time, but I was building something. Slowly, painfully, but it was mine. That's when the messages started. The first one came at 2 in the morning. Just my mother asking how I was doing, as if nothing had happened. I deleted it without responding. The next day, 3 more. She said she'd been thinking about me and hoped I was okay. Said the house felt empty without me. I blocked her number. She started calling from different phones. My sister's phone. Numbers I didn't recognize. Leaving voicemails that started casual and grew increasingly desperate. She said she'd overreacted. That she'd been stressed about money and took it out on me. That she missed me and wanted to talk. Never an apology. Not a real one. Just justifications and excuses wrapped up in sentiment. I didn't respond to any of it. I'd learned a long time ago that engaging with her only fed the cycle. She'd apologize just enough to reel you back in. Then everything would reset to how it was before. I wasn't playing that game anymore. By week 6, I'd saved up enough for a decent used laptop. I enrolled in online classes at the community college, finally pursuing the degree I'd been putting off. Information technology. Something practical that could lead to better work than the warehouse. I studied during my lunch breaks and late at night when I couldn't sleep. My life was far from perfect, but it had direction now. Purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building toward something better. The messages from my mother intensified. She sent 35 in the span of 1 week. Each one more frantic than the last. She said she needed to see me, that we needed to talk face to face. She said she'd made mistakes, but I was her son and family forgave each other. She said I was being cruel by ignoring her. That last one almost made me laugh. Cruel. The woman who threw my belongings on the lawn like trash, who stole my savings, who slandered me to our entire family, was calling me cruel for not responding to her messages. My sister showed up at the warehouse one afternoon. She'd somehow found out where I worked. She cornered me in the parking lot after my shift, said Mom was falling apart and I needed to at least hear her out. She said Mom had been crying every day, that she wasn't eating properly, that the guilt was destroying her. I asked my sister about my money, about the $2,000 that vanished from my room. My sister's face went carefully blank. She said Mom had bills to pay, that she'd been struggling, that I should understand she did what she had to do. So she'd known. They'd probably all known. And not one of them had said anything to me. I told my sister I had to get to my second job and walked away. She called after me, said I was tearing the family apart. I kept walking. That night I sat in my small room and really thought about what I wanted. Not what my mother wanted, not what my sister thought I should do, but what I actually wanted for myself. The answer came easily. I wanted nothing to do with any of them. I'd spent my whole life trying to be good enough, helpful enough, quiet enough. Trying not to be a burden while simultaneously being treated like one. I'd swallowed my hurt and made excuses for behavior that should never have been acceptable. I'd let them take from me, financially and emotionally, because they were family and that's what family did. But family was supposed to go both ways. It was supposed to mean something more than obligation and guilt. I changed my phone number. Didn't give it to anyone who might pass it along. I unfriended my entire family on social media and made my profiles private. I told my roommates that if anyone came looking for me, I wasn't there. I went completely dark. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. 3 months later, I got my first exam results back. Perfect score. My supervisor at the warehouse pulled me aside and said he'd been impressed with my work lately. Asked if I'd be interested in training for a management position. The landscaping company offered me a crew leader role for the summer season, better pay, and consistent hours. Everything was clicking into place. I was at the gym one evening when I saw my mother. She was walking through the parking lot with my sister, heading toward the entrance. I was leaving, had my gym bag slung over my shoulder. We made eye contact across 20 feet of asphalt. She looked smaller somehow, older. Her face crumpled when she saw me, and she started moving in my direction. My sister grabbed her arm, trying to hold her back, but she shook her off. I could have run, could have gotten to my car and driven away. Instead, I stood there and waited. Let her come to me. She stopped a few feet away, like she was afraid to get too close. She said my name, voice breaking. Said she'd been looking for me everywhere. That she needed to explain, to make things right. I asked her if she had my $2,000. She flinched. Started to say something about bills and stress and not having a choice. I cut her off. I told her I didn't want to hear it. I said if she didn't have my money, we had nothing to talk about. My sister jumped in then, said I was being unreasonable. That Mom had apologized 100 times and I was just being vindictive now. that she'd raised me and sacrificed so much and I owed her another chance. I looked at my sister and asked her when exactly Mom had apologized, because I'd received dozens of messages, but not one of them contained an actual apology. Not one of them acknowledged what she'd actually done. They were all just variations of "I miss you" and "come home," wrapped up in guilt trips and manipulation. My sister didn't have an answer for that. I told my mother she could keep the money, consider it payment for 18 years of housing. But that was the end of what she'd get from me. No more free labor, no more emotional support, no more chances to use me as a verbal punching bag when she was stressed. I was done. She started crying then, big heaving sobs that attracted attention from people walking past. She said I couldn't mean that I was her son, that she loved me. She reached for my arm, and I stepped back. I told her that if she'd loved me, she wouldn't have thrown my things on the lawn. She wouldn't have stolen from me. She wouldn't have lied about me to our family. Love wasn't just a word you said when you wanted something. It was action, consistency, respect. She'd shown me clearly what I meant to her that day on the lawn. I just finally started believing her. My sister called me heartless, said I'd regret this someday, that I couldn't just throw away family. I told her she was welcome to keep enabling Mom's behavior, but I was out. They could both have each other. I walked to my car and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see my mother collapsed against my sister, still crying. I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no obligation to turn around. Just relief. The messages started again after that, but from my sister's phone. Angry ones this time, calling me selfish and cruel. Saying Mom was devastated. Saying I'd broken her heart. I blocked that number too. I finished my first semester with a 4.0 GPA. Got promoted to supervisor at the warehouse with a significant raise. Moved into a better apartment, a one-bedroom with actual space and natural light. Started dating someone I'd met in one of my classes, someone kind who didn't come with years of baggage and dysfunction. Built a life that was mine, entirely mine, with no one to tear it down or take it away. 6 months after that encounter in the parking lot, my sister sent me a message from yet another number. She said Mom was sick, that she was in the hospital, that she was asking for me. The implication was clear. Come see her or live with the guilt. I read the message 3 times. Then I deleted it and went back to studying for my final exams. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me heartless, like my sister said. But I'd learned something important over those months of silence and rebuilding. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who treat your love like a resource to be mined until there's nothing left. I'd learned that you don't owe people access to your life just because you share DNA. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the same patterns to continue. That protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. My mother wanted me back because she'd lost her emotional support and convenient scapegoat. My sister wanted me back because dealing with Mom alone was hard and she needed someone else to share the burden. Neither of them wanted me back because they'd realized how they'd treated me was wrong. Neither of them had done the work to change or make amends. They just wanted things to go back to how they were, when I absorbed all the dysfunction and kept quiet about it. I was done being quiet, done absorbing, done pretending that blood relation was enough to excuse years of mistreatment. I graduated with my associate degree 2 years after that night on the lawn. Landed a job at a tech company doing IT support, salary and benefits, the whole package. Moved to a different city for the position, somewhere none of my family knew to look for me. Started going to therapy to unpack all the years of damage. Started building healthy relationships with people who showed up consistently and treated me with basic respect. Started understanding that the way I'd been raised wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable, wasn't something I had to carry forward. I haven't heard from my mother or sister in over a year now. I assume they've either given up or found someone else to fill the role I used to play. Either way, it's no longer my concern. Sometimes I think about that day, about my clothes scattered across the wet lawn, about standing there in silence while my mother screamed, about how completely helpless and humiliated I felt, how certain I was that my life was over. I'd been wrong. My life wasn't over that day. It was just beginning. Everything I'd built since then, every success and moment of peace, existed because she'd finally pushed me too far. Because I'd finally understood that staying meant slowly destroying myself to keep everyone else comfortable. The revenge I'd wanted in those early days, the anger that burned through me in my car and that motel room, had transformed into something better. I didn't need to hurt them back. I didn't need them to understand what they'd done or feel remorse. I just needed to succeed without them, to build something good and stable in mine, to prove, mostly to myself, that I was never the problem, that I was capable and worthy and deserving of better than I'd been given. Living well wasn't just the best revenge. It was the only revenge that mattered, the only one that healed instead of perpetuating the cycle. I don't know if my mother ever understood what she lost that day. I don't know if she ever took real accountability or just painted herself as the abandoned mother for sympathy. I don't know if my sister ever questioned her role in enabling it all. And honestly, I don't care anymore. Their growth or lack thereof isn't my responsibility. My peace isn't dependent on their understanding. I've built a life I'm proud of. I have people who genuinely care about me, who show up without being asked, who celebrate my wins and support me through losses. I have a career with potential and stability. I have a future that's bright and entirely my own. That's more than enough. That's everything. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.